These are prime feeding grounds. Each adult has carved out its own territory in which to hunt. And there's no space left for anyone else. This juvenile needs food. Still too young to have its own territory, there's little access to the hunting grounds. Another youngster decides to chance its luck. But the adults are all too willing to take down any trespassers. The risk of injury in these brutal confrontations is too high. Getting to the food requires a new plan. Up on the moorlands, the young caracara isn't the only one in exile. New research has found that juvenile caracaras use distinctive calls to rally together. This gang of youngsters are planning a rebellion. Working together as a group, they invade an adult's feeding territory. The balance of power shifts. The adults can't see off the entire flock. Their mobbing technique has paid off. Gorged with food, the young birds return to the moorlands. Being forced to live on the periphery is tough. And rising up against the adults is the only way to survive. Our wedgebill and all other hummingbirds have to eat more than twice their body weight in food each day. They burn through calories so quickly that if they were the size of an average human, they'd need 2 cans of fizzy drink every minute to survive. But over millions of years of evolution, they've struck up a bargain with the surrounding plants to get what they need. The plants produce flowers rich in nectar. In exchange, the hummingbirds act as pollinators. Moving pollen between flowers, they enable the plants to reproduce. But each flower only has a limited supply of nectar each day, which means the hummingbirds must compete for it. Each species has a unique ploy to get their prize. The green violet ear is one pugnacious little bird. Engaging in aerial combat, it prevents all others from getting close to its patch. The booted racquet-tail takes a different approach, using agility and speed to outmaneuver the opposition. And the tiny purple-throated woodstar has a very clever trick. Most hummingbirds are terrified of bees. Just one sting could be fatal. So the woodstar mimics the sound of a bee with its wings, scaring other hummingbirds off just long enough to get the goods. Whilst these birds may be somewhat brazen in their approach, they hold up their end of the bargain with the flowers. Our wedgebill, however, has a far more rebellious plan. While the other hummingbirds fight it out, it makes its move. The wedgebill doesn't reach inside the flower. It goes straight to the base and pierces a hole where the nectar is stored, tapping into the very source. It gets the food it needs, but it doesn't pollinate the plant.
The rainforests of eastern Australia are the stage for perhaps the sneakiest criminals of the lot. This is the satin bowerbird, a creature with a bad case of kleptomania. It doesn't stop at weaving twigs, he likes home decor too. Blue is his favourite colour. Bottle tops nicked from a nearby campsite are his proudest possessions. He has an eye for detail too, placing them precisely for maximum visual impact. She makes all the right moves, entering the bower to show she's interested. A ring makes the perfect gift. Not impressed? How about a bouquet of flowers? But something's not quite right. The penny drops. He's been duped. This isn't a female at all. It's a young male in disguise. And he's here to steal. He's part of a gang of juvenile delinquents roaming the forest, tricking unwary males. In their hideout, they display their ill-gotten gains. It takes up to 7 years for a male bowerbird to reach maturity. In the meantime, they practice making a bower and dancing for each other. But they can never have too many blue trinkets and bling. Time to go out stealing again. And bowers don't come more decadently inviting than this. But this is no ordinary bower. It's occupied by a male spy bowerbird and adorned with an irresistible array of blue treasure and jewel cameras, all perfectly placed to catch the thieves in the act. Like professionals, they approach with caution. Once again, they pretend to be courting females. This time, they work together. One distracts as the other steals the jewels. Spy bowerbird can only observe as they clean out the bower, gem by precious gem. Back home with their stolen goods, they continue to practice their courtship techniques. But Spy Bowerbird isn't off the hook. The male bowerbird who was their first victim needs to replenish his bower. Well, if you can't beat them, you may as well join them.
This Californian park is bursting with peacocks, proudly displaying their 200 tail feathers and vibrating their colourful eye spots to show off their fitness. But sometimes playing by the rules just isn't enough to get you noticed. It's a problem that this male, known as Sam, is all too familiar with. he's having a bad day. He's been strutting all morning to anyone who will pay attention.
I think he's getting a bit frisky with me, shaking his tail feathers at me.
Sam's day has been unsuccessful, and it's about to get worse. One of his rivals is closing in on a peahen. He proclaims his victory with an earth-shattering. This is the sound a peacock makes when he successfully wooed a female. Sam, on the other hand, seems rather deflated. And worse still, his opponent's trademark mating hoot appears to have drawn in a bevy of other peahens wanting in on the action. It's time for a new plan.
It seems that some males are resorting to some interesting cheating behavior.
More victorious mating hoots. And this time they come from Sam. Except he still doesn't have a mate. He's faking it. But the lure of his hoot is apparently too much for this female to resist. She seems to have fallen for his deceitful tactics.
On Paulet Island, the snow has turned to sleet. It's now muddy, cold and wet. A potentially lethal cocktail for the young Adelie penguins. The chicks hatch in late December. In the first few weeks, they're extremely vulnerable. The fluffy down coats keep them warm against the fierce winds and snowstorms, but they give no real protection against the wet. In an average year, a third of all the chicks die. I'm visiting the colony in late January. The chicks have grown quickly, and at this stage the chance of survival is much higher. Both parents are able to leave their young to hunt for food. Just a few adults are left to keep watch over huge chick creches.
Now, when the hustle and bustle of a penguin colony is at full tilt like it is now, both parent birds spend as much time at sea fishing as possible. But imagine what it's like being an adult penguin, returning to your colony and being confronted with a scene like this. How on earth do they actually recognise their own chicks? Now, I can tell you something, it's not a visual cue because, let's face it, every chick here looks pretty much the same, and they're changing their appearance on a daily basis as they molt from that fluffy chick down to their first diving plumage. The secret to how this colony works is all down to sound. Now, in my headphones, I am listening to the call of a single chick. But this sounds very much like the noise that chick's making, like that chick's making, and like that one. In fact, all of these. Now, to a penguin, that wouldn't be a problem because in the same way you may recognise a member of your own family calling out to you in a crowded room, penguins can do the same. Every single one of these noises is subtly different to the other one, which is probably just as well because if I take my headphones off, this is the reality that hits my ears.
When the parents return with food, the youngsters have to do much more than sing for their supper. They often take part in what's called food running. Successful adalies bring up 2 chicks. The adults make these young chase after them. Now, scientists aren't sure why all this energy is wasted. It may be to reaffirm the bond between parent and chick, but in lean years it often sorts out the strong from the weak. Only when the parent is convinced it's feeding the right chick will it regurgitate supper. It may look disgusting, but a recent study has found that when penguins go fishing, they switch off their digestion, leaving the fish for the young undigested in the stomach. So this chick is actually getting a fresh seafood dinner. After another night on the move, everyone's set off early. The weather and the landscape have changed again. We are surrounded by huge icebergs, and the Antarctic mainland now stretches out before us.
I just can't quite get my head around the landscape of this place. Everywhere you go, it's such a big sky. Now, all the other tourists have gone off on a little bit of an excursion. I thought, well, why on earth should we stay on the boat then? So we've gone for our own little version. Now, it's one of those days we really don't care if you don't see anything, because this place is absolutely stunning. Having said that, there's supposed to be a few crab-eater seals just over here on the shore, so I haven't seen one of those yet, so we're going to check them out. As is per usual at the moment, it's very hard to predict where any of the animals actually are, but we haven't got crab-eater seals, but what we have got is Antarctic terns, a beautiful little seabird. Some call them sea swallows, and when you see them flying around like this, you can see just why. Those lovely long tail streamers. This is the place to see Antarctic terns. Absolutely perfect setting for them, flying against this snowy landscape and glacier. Just outrageous.
These slender and noisy birds are summer visitors coming to Antarctica to breed.
Hit an iceberg. Now, this is a little bit tricky because we're both bobbing about an awful lot, but look what we've just found. Now, this may not be your thriving throng of penguins at the rookery, but this is a very important moment for me because this is my first ever chin-strap penguin. So cool because it has that very distinctive line that runs underneath the throat there.
These birds are normally noisy and sociable. This loner is about as far south as any chinstrap will go. Time for me to investigate the mainland.
I'm being eaten by a juvenile blue-eyed cormorant. This is a classic Antarctic moment. The birds here just really don't give a monkeys about human contact. Now, this bird is actually contacting me. It's completely curious. Oi, stop it.
At just 7 weeks old, this youngster is already about to fledge. In a few days, he'll be out there feeding himself. All around me, though, the race is on to feed the younger chicks before the end of the short Antarctic summer. Cormorant parents share the work. On the menu, regurgitated fish and krill. Finally, we find the seals we've been looking for right from the beginning of the day.
Now, what we've got here on this ice floe is a trio of the most numerous seal in the world. These are crab-eater seals, and there's something like 15 million of them down here in Antarctica. Now, crab is a bastardisation of a Norwegian word for crustacean. These animals actually feed predominantly on krill. Now, they feed in a very specialised way, and like a lot of seals, they don't just go around grabbing stuff. If you imagine you're trying to strain out the croutons from a mouthful of soup, you'd kind of take the mouthful of soup and then you'd close your teeth and squirt the soup out from between your teeth. That is exactly how these guys feed on krill.
This year's chicks have managed to survive the desert, the plastic and the cannibals. But nature has one last test to throw at them. The words desert island conjure up images of soft sand, lapping waves, a palm tree or two. Paradise. But this particular desert island is Seabird Island. It's in Bahrain, and it's far from paradise. The Asia crew have come here to film a large colony of Socotra cormorants, which are currently in the middle of their breeding season, raising their chicks.
I think it's pretty unusual to see seabirds in this sort of landscape. It's crazy, dry, arid, unforgiving, and obviously these guys are used to fishing at sea and being in sort of rocky, craggy places, but I don't know, it's quite a surprise to see them in such a desert sort of environment.
The crew must also deal with this sweltering desert climate, and the heat isn't even the biggest challenge.
We've got the masks on in here because there's a really fine dust of guano, like bird poo, that comes off the colony, and what happens is that can really clog up and fill the hide, and so you can't breathe a lot of the time. So we wear this to try to protect ourselves, and there's also a few nasty things you can get from the birds, so hopefully these are going to prevent that.
The worst thing is the flies. The flies just won't leave us alone. We know that they've just freshly emerged from cormorant carcasses, and the next thing they do is land on us and crawl all over our face. So that's probably the most difficult thing about being here, to be honest.
This is undoubtedly a brutal environment for people and birds alike. But lately, the cormorants have been having to deal with a new challenge.
It becomes really quite quickly apparent when you're here how much plastic is on this island. And for an island with no one living on it, it's just very depressing just to see that even here, all this stuff is getting washed up. We've seen juveniles playing with the plastic. We see juveniles eating the plastic as well. I've seen one get tangled up in some fishing net, which thankfully it did manage to escape from. Yeah, it's pretty sobering to come here and see that.
As if that wasn't difficult enough, the chicks face another danger at the very beginning of their lives. Cannibalism.
Many of the juveniles here, the larger white birds, are abandoned by their parents, which means they're not being fed anymore. But unfortunately for them, they can't forage for themselves, they can't fly, they can't swim. So they're starving. Their only solution is to walk around the colony and look for any food they can find. It's just rocks and sticks and bones. There's nothing to eat except small chicks.
They're all just so hungry, they're just waiting for any food, so it's unsurprising that they do this cannibalism. They are right on the edge. The number of dead chicks you see around the colony just shows you how on the edge these birds are.
Yet, the majority of chicks have managed to survive the desert heat, the plastic and the cannibals. But nature has one last test to throw at them.
What a morning. We were kept up all night by the storm yesterday, expecting and fearing the worst. So what's the damage?
So we've lost our shed. It's moved 1 kilometer maybe to here.
The impact of this unseasonal weather on the cormorants was clear to see.
Lots of dead chicks after the storm. Last night was really heavy storm. So now all the white dots here are just dead chicks.
These guys literally have nests made out of dust in the ground. There's no shelter, there's no protection. So I can't imagine what they went through last night. Honestly, it's a miracle there's any chicks left alive at all. It's amazing that some of the more devoted parents just obviously must have stuck through it.
And now, remarkably, it appears that life on the island is already beginning to return to normal.
It's really promising that some adults are now going off to feed, because that shows that there's still something worth feeding.
In the last few days of shooting, the crew witnessed that for these birds, living on the edge is their day-to-day reality.
They make these amazing wavy formations, so just to see tens of thousands of birds doing that all at once was, yeah, it's pretty magical.
Yeah, it is overwhelming when 15,000 birds fly just very close over your head. And it's just the noise of the wings and the birds is just everywhere. That's pretty amazing.
It reminds me of, accounts you read of sort of Victorian numbers where the skies go black and there's just abundance and just animals everywhere. Beautiful.
The Antipodean, or wandering albatross, is found in the waters around New Zealand, home to the most diverse seabird community in the world. These are rich fishing grounds for fishermen too. The birds know that where there are fishermen, a free lunch is sure to follow. So how does this get them into trouble? With a wingspan over 3 meters, an albatross is built to soar thousands of kilometers across the ocean in its quest for food. As it might go for days with nothing, it can't afford to be choosy. Anything near the surface is snapped up. Unfortunately, not everything a fisherman casts overboard is a healthy meal. Far out at sea, a long-line fishing vessel is setting its line. It's long-line vessels in particular that have been held responsible for the decline of the albatross. The fishermen pay out a line 50 kilometers long across the surface of the ocean, and every few meters they attach a secondary line with a hook, baited with a fish or squid. Every night, this vessel casts over 1,000 hooks overboard, and it is just one of many long-liners plying the Pacific, some with lines over 100 kilometers long. But this fisherman is well aware of the threat to the seabirds, and to prevent them from swallowing his hooks, he has adopted bird-friendly fishing methods. It's why he sets his lines at night, when the albatross are sleeping. And he deploys Tory lines. These simple streamers are remarkably effective at scaring birds away from the hooks. He also thaws out his bait before hooking it, so it sinks out of sight quickly. His bird catch is now virtually zero.
And after carefully analysing the footage, Mark can see exactly how the gannets are finding their food.
So we're looking at one of my favourite sequences here. It's one where all of a sudden we start seeing common dolphins up at the surface, and within seconds the gannets are going straight towards those dolphins and diving. It's really exciting to see them, and I never thought we'd get footage that was of a resolution that we could identify the species. And they're quite clearly common dolphins.
Underwater, the camera's inbuilt microphone has even recorded their calls. Mark believes the birds are using the dolphins to help find their food. And he's found evidence that they're following other marine animals too.
We had to go through essentially frame by frame here to see this, but you can quite clearly see two whales, at least whale blows, and we see that the gannet is immediately turning towards those, and easily within 15 to 16 seconds, that gannet is now diving right where those whales were at the surface. So it's indicating that those gannets are perhaps using the whales themselves there as a visual cue to say this is where other predators are, therefore this is probably where there's food. Fantastic to see these odd bits of behaviour that we would have ordinarily missed.
The footage shows that gannets are using other species to effectively find small patches of food in a large open habitat. And this has big implications for how we conserve them.
If we want to preserve gannets, we need to preserve the visual cues that they're using, which means protecting our dolphin populations, it means protecting our whale populations. All of these populations are interconnected, so we need to take an ecosystems approach to our conservation objectives.
In general, seabird populations are declining, partly because of a drop in fish stocks. But gannets don't seem to be affected, and our footage shows why.
So there's this wonderful sequence where we can see just out on the horizon a fishing vessel, and the gannet pretty much instantly starts to orient towards and fly towards that fishing vessel. Must be at least 100 other gannets around the fishing vessel here, which might indicate that gannets have learnt to use fishing vessels as a foraging cue or as a cue that there is food to be had here.
Importantly, there are very few other seabird species capitalising on this free meal.
There's almost exclusively gannets around here, and they're quite an aggressive species, so they're managing to successfully outcompete other seabirds for that fisheries resource.
By exploiting fishing vessels, they get access to a steady supply of food, even when their prey is in decline. The onboard cameras have been a success. They've shown us how these birds use other animals and even fishermen to find their next meal.
New Guinea is a vast island nestled close to the continental landmass of Australia. As we move south and east to smaller, more distant islands, the wildlife becomes even more unusual. The little-known island of New Caledonia is a small sliver of Australia that was cast adrift over 60 million years ago. It's home to a creature that seems to have evolved quite strangely. It has wings, but it can't fly. It is the kagu. Kagu families stick together, with young from previous years helping to declare the family territory. All intruders are chased away. It's the breeding season, when males rekindle the flame with their lifelong partners. It's hard to know what the kagu is related to, a heron, a rail, or maybe a pigeon. Its closest relative may actually be the sunbittern of South America, 11,000 kilometers to the east. She may not seem too impressed, but then kagus always keep their feet very firmly on the ground.
In a forest in Finland, a black grouse is preparing to put on a show. It's the most important performance of his life. It will determine whether or not he gets to breed. Only one male will get the chance to mate this year, and that male will have all the females. The others will get nothing. With such high stakes, the competition is intense. The females begin to arrive, and the dance-off moves up a gear. More and more males join in. These birds can wait years for an opportunity to mate. Some will never get the chance at all. The females seem to have spotted a potential winner. It's half dance, half handbags at dawn. One last lunge is all he needs to win the bout. It's all over. The loser slips away. The best performer is the strongest male. And that's just what the females are after. His strength will be passed to their chicks, giving them the very best start in life.
The female's the largest and the most adventurous. Flapping her wings to strengthen them, she approaches the edge. But even she's thinking twice. It's a steep drop to the ground below. A crash landing. That wasn't in the flight plan. She could have broken her wing or flight feathers. Not quite the encouragement her two less confident brothers were looking for. But she has more immediate concerns. Wolves are on the prowl. Lacking the strength to take off vertically, she climbs back up the rocks to gain height for another attempt. And she's ready to try again. Success! Spurred on by their sister's achievement, the others seem a little braver. Now they've successfully fledged. It won't be long until all three leave their parents for good.
In Mexico, there's a tiny creature whose spring awakening is on a truly epic scale. In the forests of the Sierra Madre Mountains, the trees are festooned with monarch butterflies. They've spent the winter asleep, huddled together for warmth. There are millions of them. These trees have been the perfect roost. The branches sheltered them like a blanket, keeping out the freezing nights. On a sunny spring morning, the butterflies begin to stir. When the sun warms their bodies above 13 degrees centigrade, they start to fly. More than 100 million take to the air. It's the biggest gathering of butterflies in the world. They're getting ready for a long and arduous journey. They stream from the colony and make their way to water to drink. Then they bask in the spring sun to get their muscles warmed up for flight. Soon, they'll be off. They're all going in search of one very special plant. And it only flowers in spring. Milkweed. The butterflies won't lay their eggs on any other plant, so they must time their wake-up perfectly for when the milkweed blooms. Generations of butterflies fly nearly 5,000 kilometers to Canada, carefully following the flowering of this one particular plant. It's the greatest insect migration on Earth, and it only starts when the sun wakes them up in spring.
These fluff balls are baby ostriches. Just a few days old. When they're fully grown, they'll get most of the water they need from their food. But as newborns, their bodies aren't as good at keeping cool, so they need to drink. They won't last much more than another day without water. But here in the Kalahari, there's not so much as a damp patch in sight. Following their parents out across this wasteland seems like suicide. especially when the temperature tips over 40 degrees Celsius. Yet, in the middle of the desolation is an astonishing number of animals. All attracted to a spring of life-giving fresh water. The chicks can see just what they need, but being hoof height makes negotiating this forest of legs seem impossible. They're agonizingly close, but can't risk being trampled. Their salvation has come in a surprising form. It's a stroke of luck for the chicks, and a safe path is clear. Their first ever drink of water.
The striated caracara.